All right, guys. So, I've spent a little bit of time recently talking about different ways to put together different teams from different eras and a couple of different ideas and things like that. It's the sort of thing I like to fool around with every now and then, though I honestly haven't really done many projects on these lines. I do want to talk about something, though, that came up a couple of years ago here through Skeetersoft NPIII, back in the good old days when the forums would be alive with this kind of talk. There is something called the dynasties that Bill Staffa came up with, and it's something I don't see talked about a whole lot. What Bill did essentially is he took teams back, some of the greatest teams of all time, mostly using the Baseball Dynasties book, but not entirely. And he took a look at them and looked to see if there wasn't any way to sort of normalize these teams so that they would play in an era that would allow teams from different eras to compete against each other in a way that's sort of fair. My understanding from the old forum posts and my memories of this is almost 20 years ago now, 15 years ago, is that he chose, I think, around the 1977, 1978 era because it allows you to have pitchers who throw complete games. It allows you to have guys who hit for power and guys who have good speed. You get guys who hit triples, guys who hit doubles, as well as guys who hit home runs and on and on. It's just got a little bit of everything. And so I thought we'd go ahead and just take a real quick look and see sort of some of the teams that they came up with, and we can just sort of talk about kind of what's going on. So without any further ado, we'll switch over here to the screen. Now this is right after that 1908 game. We've started a new game, so it doesn't matter if you want to see the standings. There they are. See the Cubs a game out behind the Giants. We haven't done anything. I just finished the game. We'll go over here to change season, and this is where the fun starts. So I have actually all 10 of these Dynasties discs. And so we'll change to the first one. These, I believe, consist of, is it 8 teams of discs? Sometimes 8, sometimes more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, it's 8, and then some of them have 9. So when you look at the first one, you get the 06 Cubs, 11 Athletics, 12 Giants. Right there you have a question, right? Because, I mean, weren't the Giants playing against the Athletics in the 1912 World Series? So, what's really going on, right? 27 Yankees, 29 Athletics, 39 Yankees, 42 Cardinals, and the 86 Mets that kind of stand out as a team that's a little bit unusual. All of these teams, I can say without looking it up, are high-ranking teams in the Dynasties list. And now if you want to see sort of what's going on, we can go over here to the roster. We'll check out the 1927 Yankees and look at a guy whose statistics we all know by heart. There's Babe Ruth. Now, this is going to show up as pretty small, unfortunately, on your screen. There's nothing I can do to sort of expand this. But Ruth's statistics are kind of taken out of context, and they've been sort of changed around. So if we're going to open this here, let's see if we can find Baseball Reference here and take a quick look and see what Babe Ruth did and how it compares to the statistics that are written here. Now, if you know Skeetersoft, we don't get a full listing of all the statistics. We just get the on-base percentage, slugging percentage for batters. And the reason why is in part because you, as the player, are supposed to be able to look at the card and sort of figure out what kind of hitter this is. I mean, Babe Ruth is pretty obvious, right? You should be able to tell pretty easily just by looking at it that this is a guy who has a lot of home run power and the ability to hit for average and do a whole bunch of other things. Looks like Firefox is going to be frozen for a little bit. We can take a look maybe elsewhere, say Lou Gehrig, who gets one of those, of course, nice single column cards. I think that's actually a tribute to J. Richard Sides. But that's another story probably for another time. We'll take a quick look here, and we see that in real life, Babe Ruth, what was he? He had a 486 on-base percentage and a 772 slugging percentage. Here's changed to 438 on-base percentage and a 648 slugging percentage. You can see that sort of the normalization that took place here was not so much of just, a straight-out formula. I don't have it loaded up. I don't think I have the subscription anymore, but if you use the normalization from Baseball Reference, you're not going to change the slugging percentage. You're going to change some of the other statistics instead. It's kind of weird how it works. This idea is a little bit different. The idea here is that you're going to take the best player on the team and the guy who's almost certainly one of the best players in the league, and you're going to compare him with the best player in the league that you're converting to, and you will modify his statistics accordingly. Now, you have to keep Babe Ruth, right? He still has to be able to hit, if not 60 home runs, somewhat thereabouts, right? But what you really want to do in this case is you want to make sure that Babe Ruth is not going to necessarily dominate everybody. And the reason why is, of course, because you've got all these other great teams. I mean, he's playing against, I don't know, look at the 86 Mets. You look at, he's got Dwight Gooden, who's got a grade 12. He's got Let's see if we can find him. Sid Fernandez here, who has another grade 12 and so on and so forth. Now, even if you play with this straight out of the box, just looking at these pictures, you can see that there are problems, right? Q2 for Fernandez and Gooden with a Q2, which means these guys are probably not going to be throwing complete games all the time. We'll go back here to the 06 Cubs, where everyone's going to be a Q0, three-finger Brown. Here's overall Q0, grade 11. Here's Ed Rulbach, grade 18, Q0, right? Guys are going to be a lot harder to play against. Gives you sort of an idea of how this stuff is put together. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to change the season again, and we'll just take a look at some of these other Dynasties seasons. I haven't done a whole lot with this, and as you'll see here in a second, I'm not a huge fan of how this is put together. If I were going to use these teams for my own purposes, I would change things around, right? Here you have, 53 Yankees, 61 Yankees. You have the 75 Reds, 98 Yankees. You could argue that these teams are probably better than the Volume 1 Dynasty teams. And that was kind of some of the brilliance that was behind the Dynasties, right? Which is that if you just get one of these, you're going to be like, yeah, but I'm missing this guy and I'm missing that guy. I need to have this player, I need to have that player, and so on and so forth. You got Mantle and Maris here, both of whom have excellent cards that look a lot like that Ruth card. You kind of want to see what it's like to have, Ruth playing against the 61 Yankees and see how that would work and how many home runs you get with a season like that. When we started clipping through this and flipping through these teams one after another, what you'll notice is that you start getting a little bit of repetition, right? 84 Tigers belong, 85 Cardinals, of course, do, 90 Athletics. These are teams that we talk about a lot. 62 Giants, though, that's an interesting choice for a team that didn't actually win the pennant in real life. And yes, the 62 Dodgers do show up. As I said, when you're making these decisions, you really have to ask yourself about some of these teams that actually won the pennant in those situations. 54 Indians, well, you have to wait till Volume 4 until you get to them. And let's go ahead and change over here and look at Volume 5 really quickly. Some of these should have 9 teams, if I remember right, because there should be volumes here that have the bonus teams, but I could be wrong. It's been a little while since I played with this. As you can see here, you have the 77 Phillies, 77 Royals. There is a 62 Dodgers. So you could set this up so that the 62 Giants and Dodgers play against each other in your greatest teams league, which is a little bit odd because they played against each other in real life. And you're like, why? Why do this? Why not just play the full season instead of messing around with this stuff? Other strange teams are like the 2002 Diamondbacks. This is mostly because of the... and this has 9 teams, by the way. 84 Cubs were a bonus team, but this is mostly because of their pitching, right? So if you go take a look at the roster, go over here to the 2002 Diamondbacks, and you'll see that, you had Randy Johnson, grade 16. You had, who else did they have pitching? You had Kurt Schilling on that team, grade 14. There are a couple other good players on this team. I mean, they had Matt Williams, who was a little bit older then, but we remember him from his days with the Giants. This is one of those teams that looked like a bunch of all-stars from before and a bunch of all-stars from later on. And then, of course, we don't forget Kim Byung-hyun, grade 16. Just don't have him play against the Yankees. Take another look here really quick at some of these others. You'll see as we move along that, some of the creativity, I hate to say this, but it started to lack. So here we again have a pretty good mix of teams. 78 Red Sox are an interesting team to put in, and the 87 Blue Jays, 2 teams that usually end up on the so-called also-rans discs, where we talk about teams that just didn't quite make it and that ended up not being in first place. 69 Orioles, but we just had the 70 Orioles, and this is where we start asking questions. 58 Yankees, but we just had the 53 Yankees and the 61 Yankees, right? 41 Yankees, but we just had the 42 Yankees as well. And that's kind of where the problems start coming up with the team selection, which is one of the reasons why I want to talk about how you would select teams. And this is where it gets really messy. The 51 Dodgers and Giants are both in this one, as well as the 49 Dodgers, right? You're like, wait, we have the 44 Cardinals, but we had the 42 Cardinals earlier, right? But at least you get the 94 Expos out of that. And then this is the one, if I remember right, the last one that has the somewhat more questionable decisions that were made. 36 and 37 Yankees, exactly. And then the 71 Orioles. It's more sort of repeats of what you have already. 1925 Washington Nationals, you already had the 24 Nationals. 88 Mets, you already have the 86 Mets. And so there are a lot of questions that can be asked here. And of course, famously, the 1905 White Sox, who we'll look at quickly here because there are like no players on this team. This is the team that has basically 5 pitchers, and Ed Walsh is only a grade 8 Q0. So you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with your pitching. Nick Altrock also, grade 8 Q0. Not exactly the guy you want to keep in forever. There's Owen, there's Patterson, and there's Frank Smith, who's the only guy who's got a grade above 12, well, above 10. He and Doc White, I guess. How is this team going to win any games? I have no idea. Anyway, though, that gives you sort of an idea, and there's at least one man's opinion and one man's thought on what could happen with this type of setup. I have always liked taking the teams that are listed there and sort of, messing around with other teams and other scenarios to see what would work if we were going to put together sort of a dynasties type league. I would argue, though, that you really need to create, as I said last time, a sort of a resume for these teams. You need to look not just at won-loss record or even dynasty statistics, but you need to have positive and negative aspects of each team. And also, hopefully, you want to avoid having teams that have the same players, right? You don't want to have the 36 Yankees and the 37 Yankees there with the 39 Yankees and the 41 Yankees and the 42 Yankees and, on and on and on, because it's going to be the same teams playing against the same teams, and there's no real point to it, right? We have to come up with some sort of system that allows us to choose the best team out of teams that are very similar, and another system that allows us to keep having the same players play against each other. You try to put them in separate leagues and have a couple of different leagues going on at once. That's sort of my thinking behind this. Again, let me know what it is that you think would be interesting and what sort of ideas you have, especially if you've done projects like this. I'm not necessarily going to do this with National Pastime, with NP3, that is, although I would argue that among all the games, it probably has the best setup for this type of replay, whereas the likes of, say, OOTP don't have very good setups because it's not exactly clear how the normalization and how these things that are happening under the hood are actually happening. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. If all else fails, we can always petition Bill to make more cards for us, which would be a great victory, I think, for everybody involved. Anyway, I'll talk with you guys again later. Bye.